Hi, my name's Matt, and this is the Pressure Proof Creative Podcast, the show where world-class creatives come together to drop the mask, burn the bullshit, and get real about the pressures, the pains, and monumental uncertainty of generating genius on demand. Like, subscribe, and comment to show your support. So it's really good to have you on a podcast, Laura. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for being here.
It's very, very good to see you.
Likewise. Should we just kick off by just anyone who doesn't know you, which would be very few people, just to kick off like who you are, what you do, and how you got to this position, essentially?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Laura Jordan Bambach, I am the Chief Creative Officer and one of the founders of Uncharted, which is a creative agency here in London, fully independent. And we've been going just over 18 months. Prior to that, I was the President and Chief Creative Officer at Grey in London. But I've worked at a lot of the big, very creative agencies here for over the last sort of 20 years. I started in digital and actually started working for an amazing agency called Deep End in the 1990s in Sydney, and then moved over to their London office just during the dot-com crash, end of 2000, beginning of 2001, something like that, as a designer. So sort of worked very originally as a producer, then as a designer, then sort of doing a lot of sort of digital design, animation, interactive stuff, web dev, all of that kind of stuff through the 2000s, to a head of design, head of art position. And then when I had my son, which was 18 years ago, I realized that keeping up with the coding side, like the kind of hardcore coding side of the sort of the digital creative space, was incredibly hard with a small child, with baby. And so I made the leap to creative direction. But I'm still very hands-on, so I still do quite a bit of design. I was doing some artworking yesterday.
Amazing.
I still do a bit of digital, I still do a bit of coding, but really, nothing to write home about, but kind of really lent into, I'm a big fan of new technology and I've really lent into AI. And so I do a lot of AI. I've got an AI arts practice kind of on the
Oh,
side.
wow.
I'm making a film at the
Oh,
moment. Yeah.
amazing. Didn't know
Yeah.
that. Wow.
Yeah.
Brilliant. What's your favorite part of the job? What would you say you enjoy the most?
I love two things. I love making stuff.
Mm.
I've got a slide somewhere of a sign that I, took a picture of that just says, all I want to be is someone that makes things and thinks about them.
Yeah.
And I think that sums me up. I absolutely love making stuff, trying things out, building new things. That act of creativity is incredibly intoxicating.
Mm.
And the other thing I love in the job is that you are learning about something new every single day. So you become an expert in your client's business and your client's products,
Yeah.
how they work, where they get their commercial success from, what their audience is like, what their audiences are into. And I find it utterly fascinating. I find people incredibly fascinating. And so designing something, building something that is going to emotionally connect with a certain group of people, I find, just wonderful.
Is there any difference working like in London than working when you were working in Sydney? Is there any difference, would you say?
I mean, it's been a long time, I guess, since I worked in Sydney. Um, what the industry's completely changed.
Mm.
When I started in digital, and even when I first moved over here, it was kind of, we were like pirates of the industry. No one really understood what we
Mm.
did. No one could do what we do. There were no, there were no social media platforms. There were no standards. There were no, none of that existed. So everything we built from scratch by hand. And really crafted it for the audience, but also it was very experimental
Yeah.
because new things were happening and you'd be able to connect one new thing with another new thing. And so, often we were pitching and building things that hadn't really been invented yet. And we were like, well, we kind of know that we can do it, but we don't know how to do it. But if we sit down and think about it, we can. So it was an incredible time of experimentation, I would say, up until really into, past 2010, once social media really started to take off, close its APIs down and become very formulaic.
Yeah.
There was a lot of experimentation in that digital space. Uh, Unfortunately, a lot of that has been pushed to one side with, best practice and, like I said, sort of formulaic spaces. There's still a lot of creativity there, but it is kind of not the wild landscape maybe it once was in a lot of ways. It's what excites me about AI because I feel the excitement around what I'm doing there the same way that I felt the excitement when I built my first web page in 1994.
I was
So,
going to say, I can imagine
yeah,
that. Yeah, totally.
yeah.
Is it the same or is it better? Because it's kind of even more kind of freedom, isn't it? I guess
Yeah, I
potential.
mean, the benefit of when the web hit was I was at university,
Mm.
and so I had the time, I had the labs. I was doing a degree in photography in photo media, but there was nowhere to place digital at art school because there weren't kind of separate courses back then. So it sat within photography, and I was one of two people who kind of really lent into that and majored in sort of digital electronic interactive art. So I had a lot of time to play and to build things and to experiment. Now obviously, so AI is part of my job, but it is moving really, really fast. And I would say that the biggest challenge is finding the time to keep up to date.
Yeah.
It's a challenge with my film is I keep on making it. Basically, I've sort of made the whole film now, but every time one of the platforms brings out a new feature, I'm like, oh, I could redo that bit using
Update
this
it.
thing if I so it's a good way to keep myself up to date and to learn.
Yeah.
But I would love to, have the benefit of, being able to sit in a university lab for 6 months and just noodle away.
I bet. I bet. How long's the film? Is it a short or a feature
It's
or
a
what?
short film.
Amazing.
It's a short film. It's called The Bush, and it is an Australian perimenopausal folk horror.
I love great pitch. You must be a creative. I love that. That's great. Wait, so when's that coming out, or is it depend on when the next
Oh, yeah, I think it'll depend. I need to find some time to finish it properly and to actually do the edit, which is the bit that is, there are things like CapCut that make things easier,
it's great, yeah.
but yeah, but I need some time to do the edit properly. Uh, so we'll see. At the moment, I'm almost using it like a learning tool, so it will
Yeah.
be the movie that never finishes, but keeps me with my finger on the pulse.
100%. It's a great way to do it, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
probably the only way to do it is actually push the technology like you've always seemed to have done.
Yeah, yeah, and it's really interesting. What I'm trying to do is so it's a bit of an experiment in um the more consumer facing tools. So rather than building my own models or using Comfy, which is a great but kind of much more, I guess, professional tool in that it doesn't have a nice, it doesn't have a great interface or anything like that. You're sort of plugging things together. I'm trying to do it with things that are really readily accessible to people to try to push them into the corners where they break a little bit and see
Mhm.
what it's capable of,
Yeah.
which has been really interesting doing the genre that I'm doing because horror is particularly hard on most of those platforms because they are kind of closed systems,
Yeah.
and they have guardrails.
Mm.
Um, Australia is quite hard because there's more content that the models have been trained on about Australia from outside of Australia. So things tend to get very Crocodile Dundee very
I can
quickly.
imagine. Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
And doing middle-aged women is very difficult because with all the best kind of prompting and testing, it still wants to change you and kind of de-age you all like constantly. So but those things, are getting better, but it's a good way of me kind of seeing where those corners are.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
What would you say is what would you say is the most challenging part of being a creative? Like over the years you've been doing it, what would you say was the most challenging part of having a creative brain?
Um, Honestly, I think the most challenging part, because I absolutely love it and I always have, and I think, I'm sure I always will, think that it is a very emotional job.
Mm,
You are responsible for summoning something out of the ether, out of the things around you, which is literally what your business makes money from. It's something that is maybe not necessarily very easily understood.
mm,
It's not something that's very easily measurable, so it makes it hard for a business, if for any business, even a creative business, to kind of put a monetary value, I guess, against creativity.
yeah.
And because of that, the whole creative business has been shaped, I think, in a way that doesn't necessarily fit us. Um, and every idea you put out there, I say to students when I teach them, maybe 10% of anything you ever come up with is ever going to be made, and maybe 10% of that will be made the way that you really feel inside your gut is the right way to make it. Um, and you have to get used to that a lot. You have to get used to a lot of rejection. You have to get used to, you know, having dry spells. You have to get used to losing pitches internally to, better creatives or different ideas. And you have to get used to, losing pitches to other agencies.
Yeah.
It's all very, every idea, every piece of work that you make is like your baby. So it can be, you have to learn to be able to kind of separate yourself and the from the work. Because otherwise, I've seen a lot of fantastic creatives really burn out
Yeah.
quite quickly because they become very attached to their work, and it's hard not to take things personally.
Yeah. Do you think it's a problem that people can over-identify with what they do and mistake that for who they actually are?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're not trained, you go into, you want to, have a career and make money from being creative. Um, there is no kind of training in how to separate yourself. A lot of us, like me, I went to art school. When you're making art, your art is you.
Very
Luckily,
much.
I went to a really good art school where they were very, very brutal with sort of group crits and that kind of stuff. You had to stand in front of your entire class. So, whatever it was, 30 people doing photo media. And you have to talk about your work, and people were encouraged to rip it apart while you stood there. That felt really cruel and really awful. But honestly, I think it was the best training. But I think a lot of people don't have that. And there's not a lot of training out there for creatives
No.
anyway. There's like practical stuff, how to use a tool, how to, use the Adobe suite. And even things like how to become a better art director. But there's not a lot of investment in creative people. I think because people feel like you're creative or you're not. It's like this magic thing. Um, so yeah, I think it's hard for a lot of people. I've seen a lot of people get into some serious problems, whether that is burnout or addiction. I would say there's a lot of neurodiversity
Yeah.
in creatives as
Mm.
well, and addictive behaviors, or um, you know, needing to work in more unconventional ways to get the best out of people, which doesn't necessarily fit a business. So it's kind of a business built around us that doesn't necessarily serve our interests all the time. That's
Mm.
why like strong um, creative leaders are so important, in terms of being able to bring that culture of creativity through the whole business, not just the department.
How do you think the role of and the kind of the shape and look of creative leadership's changed since the 90s? How would you say it's changed?
Um, I think it's difficult because digital has always been, we were kind of like the odd ones out. I would say the more traditional places, creatives had more space, more office, offices, they had time, there was more encouragement to be kind of mischievous, and the role of creatives, because the testing and the tools and the data wasn't there, um, in a way, it was more respected because it was less measurable.
Mm.
And so people had to just go, okay, I'm going to take your word for it a little bit more. In digital, it's always been like less hierarchical, more collaborative, more of a test and learn kind of atmosphere, more. I think this is the beauty of digital, actually, like really leaning into understanding the audiences properly.
Yeah.
The digital agencies I've worked at have had, some of them have had anthropologists. We've had, when we haven't had the measurement systems we've got now, we had, eye tracking or screen tracking. You could really understand how people were feeling. You could send someone along to watch how they did a particular, IDEO have got a great way of kind of sitting and observing and looking for the things that particular audiences do that are unsaid.
Mm.
Um, and that's really important in the digital space because you want people to, you want the products that you make, the things that you make to be sticky.
Yeah.
You're not just making them to shock or to entertain. It's actually also they have to be incredibly useful, and little tiny tweaks will make a huge financial difference to the business that you're working on. And I think that's something that I really love, that curiosity about who you're making it for keeps you very humble.
Mm. Yeah. And is it easy or hard to protect the kind of the, for lack of a better word, the sanity of your team members when you're running under those kind of situations and pressures?
Um, I think it very much, I mean, I won't say I find it easy. I find it hard, but I find it incredibly rewarding, and I know that I'm good at it.
Mm.
Um, but there are lots of different creative leaders because someone who's an incredible creative brain isn't necessarily a fantastic creative leader, and vice versa. I actually had an old boss of mine. He's has this amazing AI consultancy and community which I'm part of called Obsolete. Um, and I, love him dearly, and he's been a very good friend of mine now for a long time. But I was a senior designer when I worked with him. It was one of my first jobs here. And he actually said, not that long ago, you make so much of a better creative leader than you ever were a designer. I went, you know what? I will take that. You're absolutely right. Sometimes you've got to work through the stuff, work really, really hard on the stuff that maybe you're not as naturally good at as other people to get to the thing that you really are good at, because it's that job of creating creative culture and, that creative director role, like understanding what the bits are of people's ideas and making them shine. That's
Mm.
that's the bit that I love. And I love seeing the success of the people in my team, putting their name on things, helping them to see something in themselves and their work that they maybe haven't spotted, because it's how I got into the industry. I was
Mm.
incredibly persistent, but incredibly um, untrained. And when I got my job at Deep End, it's through, again, someone that I love very dearly, Simon Waterfall, who founded Deep End. He
Yeah.
would come to Sydney. He was setting up an agency there. I was desperate to work there because it was the coolest fucking agency in the world, digital agency in the world. And, he would say, look, you haven't trained as a designer and I only hire the best designers. I don't have a role for you, but, go and learn this and this and this and come back to me next time I'm in Sydney. Show me your portfolio again. And I, did that. And I think we caught up. It was probably over the course of a year or maybe even longer, maybe even 18 months. And he finally said, he's still not good enough to be one of my designers. But, I like your attitude and your persistence. Do you want a job as a producer? And I went and worked there in Sydney for 12 months, 18 months as a producer. And then he went, okay, now you're good enough to be one of my designers. I've
That's
got a
amazing.
junior design role in London on 12 grand. And I think I
Yeah.
was on like 100 grand in Sydney.
Yeah.
It's like, if you take the massive pay cut, I will get you over here and I'll give you a job as a junior designer. And I was like, you know what, that's what I want to do more than anything in the world. So yeah. So I packed up and moved over here.
That's a huge pay cut, isn't it?
Huge pay cut, started at the bottom of the tree, but it was fine because I'm in the best agency. And then I was sitting next to the best designers in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I learned so much and amazing people. Like my first desk mate was Lolly. We used to share a desk together. But just like so many incredible people still doing incredible things came
Yeah.
out of that one business.
Wow.
Yeah.
So would you say for, like has the pressure changed internally for you as you've kind of like climbed the ladder?
Yeah, it has. I think there is there's probably a certain like pressure and stress I have about am I good enough? Because I know how hard I've had to work to do the best work that kind of sits there, particularly when you're not hands-on. Um, so I think that kind of never goes away. I think the pressure of running a team I actually really love because, literally the success of the business isn't my success, it is the success of the people in my team and how well that's
Mm.
run. And not just the creative department, but the entire agency, which is why, when I was lucky enough to do that dual role at Grey, it was wonderful because I could create like a full culture of creativity.
Yeah.
Um, and I had a lot of sway in terms of things that I believe bring better creative work, this sort of diversity of talent, diversity of thought, different perspectives, space for people to be who they are and push into their own interesting corners rather than having to chop everyone's corners off to fit a box or a
Mm.
utilization sheet. Um, and, trying to foster, again, a culture where the parts of the business that are running the business understand the business that we're in and what's involved in it. So, trying to connect, being really close to the CFO. But then, there are obviously pressures that you have at that level that you don't have, like making, looking at things like profitability, understand reading a spreadsheet, which no one is ever taught to do if you're creative.
Yeah.
I think the first time I sat in a board meeting and I looked at the spreadsheet and people were talking about EBITDA, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Why have you brought me into this meeting? Is anyone going to tell me what's going on? Didn't want to ask. Um, So, there are the financial pressures. There are, things that you need to worry about. You need to be good at solving interpersonal problems as well.
Mm.
Creative people, like I said, they're emotional, and a lot of people are quite neurodivergent. And some people need different kinds of support at different times, or sometimes you need to be the person in the middle to help, like, repair a relationship that you can see has gone wrong for, no other reason than not being able to understand each other's point of view. So
Mm.
you're also like part counselor,
Yeah.
part like finance commercial person, part making sure the work is right. And people have different ways of leading, and you don't have to do all of that yourself. I think that's the big thing. You build a team around you, and as a team, you're kind of invincible, but you don't have to be invincible yourself.
Mm. Was that a very big learning that you don't have to be invincible yourself?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think I around about that time when I moved to my first creative director role, um, I really felt like I couldn't. Yeah, that I had to kind of show that I was absolutely kind of unbreakable. And so I was working very long hours. I had a small baby. I had a new job because I kind of shifted jobs to make that shift into creative direction. And I wanted to show that yeah, was unbreakable, ab the absolute best at everything. And yeah, I have kind of reached that point a few times, I think, in my career where I've suddenly realized I'm going to burn out.
Mm.
Um, I have quite a lot of energy, so I tend to like take things on and I like solving issues. So I'll like, start things or, invent things that are going to make the culture better or people better or whatever. And I'd certainly taken on kind of a lot of that. And when people were going, well, how do you do it all with the baby? And I'm like, oh yeah, no, I just do it. It's all fine. And then I found myself, sitting, working on a pitch with my mate Resh, who's now at Snapchat. We both had small children, and I had my, son underneath the desk at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
Um, while I was, working on a project for BT that had to be delivered, going, oh yeah, maybe this isn't normal.
Well, how did the industry treat? Because I mean, it was 18 years ago.
Yeah.
How was it treated? Was it treated as just ignore the fact you actually had a child at the same time, or?
Yeah, so really interestingly, and I am going to big up Joe Haggart, and
It's
Seb.
great.
So Seb, I I was head of art. Seb was the creative director at Glue and one of the founders, and Joe was the MD. Joe and I were the first two people ever to be pregnant within that agency. There was not
Wow.
even a maternity policy before the two of us got pregnant, and we got pregnant like we had our sons within a week of each other. So luckily I had her there as the MD thinking about what happens to women when they have babies. But it was